Can you change in 21 days? You can change in 21 seconds. You see, people say, isn't it hard to change? No, you get to change twice every day. You get to change something you think, and then you get to change something you do. So every day you can change at least twice.
So you think of therapy as human behavior? You think of it as a means to change human behavior?
I think therapy is very good at finding broken people and putting them back together. And we're all broken to a degree. A good therapist and a good therapy can undo damage. We're all damaged. We're all flawed. But there are degrees of damage and degrees of flawed. And I love that thing about in Japan, they believe that a broken vase that has a gold filigree in it is better. So I believe that everyone is flawed, and I'm a flawed person. And I had flawed relationships with flawed people. I call it being flawsome. I've always been interested in human behavior. Being a therapist, if you're a good therapist, is the fastest way to change a lot of people one at a time. I mean, everybody wants to change the world, but that's a big ask. But if you can change people one soul at a time, that's how you can help change the world. One of the rules of the mind is the longer a belief is held, the more resistance there can be to letting it go. So certainly if you had a belief for 5 years, it's easier to let it go than one you've had for 40 years.
So a good therapist is one that can quickly get to the thought.
A good therapist starts off being a good detective. A good detective will kind of look at stuff and stick pictures up on a wall and try and work out what happened. And a good therapist does the same. You listen to your client. So you start off being a detective, gathering information, looking for clues, and then you become almost like a dentist, extracting all that toxic stuff. And then you become like a coder, coding in and wiring in something much better for your client. And if you do all those three at the same time, it's immensely effective. So many people are trying to fix their behavior, but it's like a ladder. First you have a thought, then you have a feeling, then you have a behavior. And it's a waste of time changing the behavior. You got to change the thought. So it's like trying to help people who eat badly or binge or eat a lot of sugar. There's no point in saying, look, don't eat a cake, have an apple, don't eat fries. It's like saying to an alcoholic, don't have a glass of wine, have a cup of tea. They just look at you like you're crazy. And so thought, feeling, behavior. If you change the thought, the feelings and behavior will change on their own. So with a great therapist, the thing is, it's not what you do, it's what you help your clients. So I do something. So RTT is a formula. So the first thing you do.
What is RTT?
Rapid Transformational Therapy. So the first thing you do is you have an intake form and you look at that, and even then you're gathering information, and then you invite the client to take you back. Let's go back and have a look at where this began, and back they go. And then when you've got them, I do something called left hand, right hand, and it's okay, let's imagine you're looking at these scenes in this hand, and let's look at today. And I want you to tell me, how did those scenes cause today? Because if I tell them, hey, look, you do this because of that, they could say, well, that's not true. I told my friends, I went, oh, that's rubbish. But when you let the client work it out, because they're very able to do that, oh, I see. My dad left when I was 2. My new dad had a new baby and they didn't love me. And then my dad left as well. And now I can see that I can't form a relationship because I have this belief that people don't stick around and I'm not good enough. And now I can see that this is because of this. And when they work it out, it's their power. It's not my power. It's their power.
Why train other therapists? Why not be a legend in what you do? Why would you pass it on?
Well, my great friend Wayne Dyer said something. He said, do not die with your music still inside you. And so if you imagine if Frank Sinatra was a plumber and Barbra Streisand was a nail technician, they wouldn't have passed on their gift. And I am a good therapist, and I love being a good. People ring me and go, hey, I'm in Alabama, can I see you? I'm in Australia, there's only one of me. And so I wanted to share that. I got a letter today from someone saying...
So that's your legacy?
Yeah, it's a legacy. Someone today wrote to me and said, thank God you did this, or I'd still be in the same mess I was in. I'd love to have RTT in more schools, more hospitals, more prisons. I'd love one day when a doctor would say, before I give you this antidepressant, let's have a little look at RTT.
If you've been practicing for 30 years, do you see people getting worse or getting better?
I think what we're doing to every generation coming up is making them worse.
How come?
Well, when I was 17 and my boyfriend dumped me, I was heartbroken. I couldn't follow him on Instagram. I couldn't hack into his Facebook and see what he was doing. I just had to get over it. I couldn't call him. He didn't have a phone, actually. Only his parents had a phone. So I just had to get over it, and I did. But I think nowadays, the fact that we can look at what people are doing, we have this overexposure every day to false images of perfection. Everyone who's had a baby is in a bikini looking amazing. Everyone's got nicer kids, nicer homes, nicer dinners, better hair than you. But I think the media is making a whole generation ill. A whole generation don't speak on the phone. They text and they WhatsApp. They don't pick up the phone and say hello. They can't have a meal without having their iPhone or their phone on the table. And we're making people really disconnected. And when you arrive on the planet, you have two things you need. Find connection and avoid rejection. And if you're finding connection through your phone, then actually you're becoming disconnected. I go to a store, there's nobody there. Very soon we'll get an Uber with no driver. We're actually making people and connection so redundant. You go through your whole day now and not speak to anyone, get everything delivered. I spend quite a lot of time with tribes, and when you're around tribes, you understand something. We are not designed for the modern life we've created, where you can just go on Instacart, groceries are there. You can spend months and not speak to anyone. And now, of course, you have this new thing where you can go online and talk to a doctor, but you're not talking to them. They're not listening to you. They're not hearing the break in your voice when you describe. They're not thinking, oh, every time I mention your mother, your chin starts to wobble or tears come out of your eyes. And a good therapist is looking for clues. I notice your voice breaks every time you mention your brother or your father. But when you're doing all of that online and not face-to-face, you're losing connection. And connection is in our DNA. We need it.
In your practice, what's a loss to you?
I've worked with a lot of people with cancer. I've had it myself. And with cancer, there's always three things that can happen. Some cancers are completely survivable. Stage 1, womb cancer, which I had, that's nothing. They take your womb out and you don't have cancer. And it's stage 1, so it's totally survivable. And then you get a cancer where you can contain it for a long time. You might not get better, but you may have 10 years. Someone said to one of my patients, you will die with cancer, but not of it, because you can just hold it. And then there are cancers where, sadly, you're not going to survive. And that is sad. But even then, you can still help a client.
Do you ever get tired of therapy? Do you ever feel like...
No, never.
No? Till today?
No, I've never got tired of it because, people say that, isn't it draining, people telling you their stuff? No, it's amazing, because I know the day I see them is the day that they can change. Even with the saddest story ever, and believe me, I've heard some terrible stories, even with the saddest story you could ever imagine. I'll give you an example. I worked with this amazing girl who was telling me this story that her father was a drug dealer. And he dropped her and her sister off and said, go over there, there's people who are going to babysit for you. And her sister walked into the swimming pool and drowned. And she was blamed for that. And she said, my father always said my whole life I wasn't his. And he treated me horribly because he believed I wasn't his. The mother left long ago. And he had about 6 children, but she was the one that wasn't his. And I said, well, where are these others, apart from one Dutch, because they're all in jail. And I said, thank God you're not his. That's the best thing that could ever happen to you. You're not his. She said, that's true, because I would get up, go to school really early and stay. I hated the holidays because school was my salvation. I got away from him and that crazy house. And I studied a lot, very academic. And just that little reframe, the worst thing is the best thing. When you're a kid, not being his made you different and disconnected, but now you can look back and think, I'm so glad I'm not his. And so if you can reframe anything with a client, no matter how bad it was, but I think a lot of therapy is suiting the therapist. The idea that you come in every week to talk about your problems for years on end makes you dependent. You see, if you went to ER with a painful leg, or the dentist with a painful tooth, or a chiropractor with a painful back, they would never go, well, turn up every week, and when we've built a relationship of trust, we might get somewhere. They'd say, oh, you're in pain? let me get you out of pain now. That old idea, every Wednesday at 3:00 for a year or two, is old. People don't want that. We live in such a fast world. I mean, all my clients, they have one issue. Can you get me out of pain? It could be emotional pain. They feel unlovable. Physical pain. They've got irritable bowel or migraines that are caused by stress. And it's no different to going to the emergency room. A therapist's job is to get you out of pain as fast as they can. That's what clients want. It's actually what most therapists want too.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you too.